Hello everybody, I'm coming to you today to talk about plant decks, and before we talk about things in depth, I would like to do a little intro to explain what this whole thing is about. So if you know me a bit, you know that I work with plants a lot in my practice for medicinal purposes as well, and food and all of that, so plants are very important to me, and as somebody who loves divination, as well as working with plant spirits as allies in my craft, plant decks as a category of decks, I suppose, is on my radar a lot and has been over the years. And I have to say that I have a very particular taste. This is not something that will work the same way for everybody, so I would like to just briefly explain my own approach so you can kind of understand where I'm coming from. So I've had quite a few decks like this over the years. Some of those would be like the Herbcrafter Tarot, the Magickal Botanical Oracle, the Seed and Sickle Oracle, the Dirt Gems Oracle, stuff like that, right? And I've gotten rid of most of them because they were not working for me. And here's my problem with plant decks, and that would be, I guess, the majority of what I see out there. That's what those decks look like usually, is that you will see very particular keywords on the cards and very particular depictions on the cards that make the interpretation of the card very specific, very particular, very narrow. And more often than not, those interpretations of the cards, of the plants that are in those cards, are not in line with how I perceive them, how I work with them. So that's a huge issue for me, because I see that oftentimes those plants are perceived more as archetypes, like syncretized or eclectically connected with some like deities, stuff like that. That's definitely not my cup of tea. And also a lot of the times they are very like American centric, in the sense that they would usually have a collection of plants or selection of plants, like 1/3 of which doesn't grow where I live, which for me defeats the purpose. I understand that for many people plant decks are just like a type of aesthetic, that's, just like any other, like, I don't know, architectural decks or like novelty decks from certain movies, shows, stuff like that, or like with deities, shit like that. And so the plants aren't approached as plants, but more so as like energies, archetypes, whatever. That's not how I approach plant decks. I prefer to be able to connect with the card, like connect the card to my own perception of the plant and how the plant kind of shows up for me in my practice and in my life. So most of those decks, because they are so heavily like over-interpreted almost, makes it unusable for me, basically. So what I like is to be able to curate my own experience and to be able to focus very much bioregionally, to have plants that grow where I live, and that are depicted in ways that are neutral enough so that kind of my own way of working with them can shine through rather than somebody else's, right? So, like for example, the Herbcrafter Tarot is very much like South American focused, which, it's a very beautiful deck, but it's just not my culture, not my plants. And so even though I loved that deck, I passed it on over time because it was just not working. And the same thing happened with the Dirt Gems, for example. I know that many people love that deck. I tried it for a couple weeks and just passed it on as well, because even though I really enjoyed the kind of more animistic approach to the plants by the creators themselves, I suppose we had very different understandings of those plants, and that's totally fair, right? That's like a personal thing. And many of those plants also aren't growing where I live. They were, again, very America-centric. So I had to move that on as well. And this just keeps happening to me over and over, where I have a difficulty landing upon a plant deck that I could really like curate to my own experience living in Poland, in Central or Central Eastern Europe, right? So that said, somebody remedied that, and it's a Slavic creator. She creates a series of like expansions or decks that are themed around certain chosen properties of plants. And so you are able to fully curate your own experience with that. And also the way the plants are depicted is very simple, very neutral. It's just the plant and the Latin name of the plant and nothing else, which is just perfect for me. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So the only plant oracle deck that I kept from the ones I told you about was the Magickal Botanical Oracle, and the reason is because it's quite neutral. Again, it does have very artistic depictions of the plants, but they seem to be more in line with how I see some of them, so that's cool. But that's like, you know, an accident. Basically, you can't control that, right? And it also just has the name of the plant and the Latin name of the plant, and that's it, and some like correspondences. And the book that comes with it as well is cool because it mostly talks about like the way these plants are perceived in you know, witchcraft and occultism broadly. So like, you know, correspondences, some folklore, and some like magical uses and stuff like that. I don't really relate to all of it, but out of all of the decks that are like mass market that I tried, this one is probably the closest to what I can accept, basically. And there's a cool variety of plants that I also just happen to be working with in my craft, you know, especially because there's a lot of poison plants, which happens to be an interest of mine, which I don't talk about a lot publicly because this kind of stuff is dangerous, right? But yeah, so that's the only one I actually kept, and I have it edged in brown like this. So yeah. So now let's move on to these decks I wanted to actually talk to you about. These are created by Mariana, who is a creator from the Czech Republic. As you know, I really like showcasing Slavic artists, especially when it comes to decks. So it's nice to be able to show this one. And now you can see 3 piles because these are actually 3 separate decks or expansions that you can, you know, curate, combine together, pick which ones you want to keep versus which ones you don't want to keep in your base deck. Kind of a similar experience to how I go about the Memento Mori Oracle, which you can see in another video. I show how I curate my own Memento Mori deck. But just to explain how this works, there's 3 decks, right? The first one here is Venelestis Caelestis, which has been like the first base deck that the creator put out there. And then just recently, I think like a couple months ago now, she released this first expansion, which is called Venelestis Medicatrix. And then I also received a prototype. This is not for sale yet, I think, which is the Venelestis Fungorum deck. So this one is just mushrooms. I'm just going to walk you through all of them and kind of talk about them. And the only difference I can see, I got this deck sometime in the summer before there were pre-orders for the new expansion and all of that. And this one has a slightly different cardstock than these ones, but it doesn't actually, like, it's not an issue when you combine them together. So yeah, all of them have the same backs and everything. So this was my first deck of the series that I got. and I'm just going to walk you through so you can kind of see that it's very simple artwork in the sense that it does not add any like embellishments or beings or symbols of any kind. It's just the plant. So you can actually use the deck even to like go out there in nature and to potentially help you identify plants. So that's really cool. And this one has various plants as well as mushrooms, because for each of those decks you will see that there's plants plus something else extra, kind of a thing. So most of these plants, not all of them, but most of these grow where I live, or I can grow them where I live. So this is very helpful because I can actually relate to the deck and I can curate from all of those to create something that feels familiar, that's actually comprised of plants and mushrooms that I can go and encounter out there in nature, or in the forest or in my own garden. So that's really nice. And you can see at the bottom there's just the Latin name of the plant. So if you don't know Latin names of the plants, it might take some time to learn that. I'm familiar with most of them. Sometimes I have an issue because I recognize the plant, but I don't remember the Polish or the English name of the plant. So for me, it's kind of like, because I don't teach this, I don't need to like know these things, I guess, is my point, to help somebody else understand. It's just for my own use. So my knowledge of plants is kind of like mixed between Latin and Polish names of plants, and then some of them I also know the English names, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's the first one. That's the Venelestis Caelestis. Then the second one, which is I guess the first expansion that just came out and is available for purchase. And this one is mostly centered around the theme of folk medicine and folk healing, right? So that's the kind of plants that you will encounter here. Plus you get pollinators as well. So that's really nice. And again, when I look at the plants, I know that most of them grow where I live. Not all of them, but most of them. And I can curate and choose the ones that, like for example, Passiflora doesn't grow where I live, right? I can choose for my base deck to keep only the ones that actually matter in my practice, that I can recognize, that I have worked with or am planning to work with, so that it kind of makes sense for me and my bioregion, right? Because to me, it kind of doesn't make sense to be, I don't know, using a deck in which I have plants that grow on another continent in a completely different climate, because what am I supposed to do with that exactly? I don't know, like I genuinely don't know what I would be doing with that kind of information in my divination or anything really. I just don't get it. I understand that some people work with plants as archetypes. Again, that's not my vibe. I don't understand the purpose of that. And yeah, it wouldn't make much sense for me. So yeah, you can see that there's quite a big variety of plants here. And many of them I happen to grow in my own garden or have available in the forest nearby. So that's pretty amazing. And lastly, I'm going to show you the prototype, which is the Venelestis Fungorum. And these are just mushrooms, right? So here's the thing, like I know that this is not a thing everywhere in the world, but for many Slavic countries, that includes Poland, going foraging for mushrooms, especially in early autumn, is like a national sport pretty much. So many of us are taught from very early on to be able to recognize mushrooms, especially the ones that, you know, grow where you live actually, so that you are able to go and forage. And I learned from my grandmother when I was still a small child, and I remember that very fondly, and I still go mushroom hunting every autumn. So having something like this, where again you can see what the mushroom actually looks like, what is its Latin name, is quite helpful, to be honest. And not all of these grow where I live, but again, I would usually curate a deck like this, like a base deck, right, that only contains the plants, mushrooms, and pollinators and all of that that are present in my bioregion. So let me get back to you with a curated deck, and I will show you like a final flip through of a deck that I would make. But before we do that, I can just quickly show you how thick it would be if I was to just combine all of these as they are right now. So this is quite massive and I would go for like half of this, or maybe a bit more than half of this for my base deck, right? Because yeah, this is way too many cards. Okay, and I'm back with a selection of cards that would be my own curated deck. As you can see, it's kind of half of what the entirety of the cards would be, right? So I'm just going to walk you through it and show you what I chose. I'm not going to comment much on this. These are plants that grow in my garden or in the fields nearby or in the forest, as well as some pollinators and some mushrooms that are present in my bioregion as well. So when I look at these, I can recognize each and every one of them. So, you know, it's actually usable for me and for what I do, what plants I work with, right? And for many of them, I can also like immediately just looking at the plant, I can remember its properties so that it's actually useful for divination. For some of them, not all of them, I also remember like the local folklore and all of that. So that's like an additional layer that I would normally add to readings with decks like this. So the way I utilize decks with plants or decks that are like nature-based in general is that I would use them for divining, like in the case of plants, like for example, which plant ally could help me with a particular situation that I'm in, or for particular purpose that I am working on, or perhaps a problem I have, a health issue, or otherwise, you know, something that can inspire positive change in my life, you know? So that's usually what I would draw from a deck like this. And also, a lot of the times, it's helpful to be able to ask, like, for example, if you are trying to figure out what kind of offering to give to a certain spirit, if there is an indication that they would like some kind of herbal preparation or incense or something like that, plant-based something, right? Then I would also pull one card or several cards to establish which plants that spirit would like to be honored with, right? So this is very helpful for me, and honestly, like, this is the first deck like that in my collection where I can actually curate my own plants. Each and every one of them in this deck matters to me, is known to me. I know what I'm doing. I know, you know, all of these plant allies. So that's like a dream come true to be honest with you. And that's also why I wanted to share it with everybody, because I talk to people, right? And many of my friends or like folks in my community are also into plants, into working with plants. And I know that I'm not alone in struggling with finding proper tools, especially for divination around that. So this is actually the first one where I can like openly recommend it to people and be like, yeah, this is good shit. Like, honestly, go for it, right? Especially for folks in Europe, but I know that in parts of the US where you guys have similar climates to ours, most of these plants would apply as well. And some of those I did not choose, like, are also from different climates too. So I believe that everybody can find and curate a deck with enough plants for themselves from what's available, right? And I'm really excited because I know that Mariana is working on another expansion other than the Fungorum, which is not out yet. I know that she's also working on an expansion with visionary plants, or like plants that have these kind of connotations of being either like poisonous or inducing altered states of consciousness, inducing trance, that kind of a thing. So I'm really looking forward to that, because some of the plants in that deck I also work with. Do not try to apply connotations here about how I work with them, because you might be surprised. But yeah, I'm really excited to add that to my collection as well, and be able to add some of those plants to this base deck that I use. So just to make it clear, I paid for the Venelestis Medicatrix oracle with my own money, and I received the Fungorum as a gift added to that deck. And I also initially received the first deck, the Venelestis Caelestis deck, earlier on in the year as a gift as well. So this is for, transparency, so that we are clear here, but all of the opinions I'm sharing here are my own. This is not sponsored in any way. I was just genuinely hyped to be able to recommend this tool. So let me know what you think. Do you have any decks, plant decks, right, that work for you in your practice? What do you look for in a plant deck? Yeah, I'm very curious to hear about this, because I know that everybody has a different experience, different needs when it comes to this. So yeah, let's compare. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and see you around soon. Bye.